They laughed the first day she stepped into the hangar. Not the friendly kind of laughter. Not the kind that welcomes someone into the fold. The kind that tests you. Specialist Elena Marquez adjusted the straps of her medic bag and ignored it. She had learned long ago that silence was stronger than reaction. Boots scraped against concrete. Rifles clinked. The air smelled of oil, dust, and anticipation. "Hey, Doc," one of the infantrymen called out, leaning back against a crate. "Try not to faint when the shooting starts." Another snorted. "She'll be fine. She'll be hiding behind us anyway." Elena didn't look at them. She had heard worse in training. She had endured worse in her life. Words were easy. Words didn't bleed. Captain Rhodes approached her, his expression unreadable. "You ready, Specialist?" "Yes, sir. This isn't a training scenario. We're moving into Al-Sharif district. Intelligence says insurgents have fortified 3 main structures. We clear, secure, extract." "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment longer. "Stay close to the rear until contact. Once it starts, you do your job." "Understood. I always do, sir." He nodded once and moved on. The laughter faded as engines roared to life. Humor died quickly when reality set in. Elena climbed into the armored vehicle with the rest of the squad. 12 soldiers. 1 medic. The vehicle jolted forward. Inside, silence replaced mockery. Some men checked their rifles. Others closed their eyes, centering themselves. Elena checked her supplies. Tourniquets, gauze, hemostatic agents, IV kits, morphine, airway tubes. She ran through procedures in her mind like a prayer. She didn't join the army to prove anything. She joined because when she was 15, her older brother bled out on a roadside after a drunk driver slammed into his motorcycle. She had held his hand as sirens wailed in the distance. The paramedics arrived too late. She never forgot the look in his eyes. So when people laughed and called her, just a medic, she remembered that night. And she remembered why she was here. The convoy halted abruptly. "Dismount," someone shouted. Boots hit dirt. The sun beat down mercilessly, heat radiating off shattered buildings. The Al-Sharif district looked abandoned, windows blown out, walls pockmarked with bullet holes, doors hanging crooked. Elena adjusted her helmet and fell into formation. The squad moved cautiously down a narrow street. Dust swirled around their boots. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then it happened. A thunderous crack split the air. Gunfire erupted from the second floor of a crumbling apartment building. Contact front. The squad scattered for cover. Bullets sparked against concrete. Elena dropped behind a burned-out car, heart hammering. Return fire. Rifles roared in response. Private Jenkins screamed. Elena's head snapped toward him. He had been caught mid-sprint and now lay sprawled in the open street, clutching his thigh. Blood pooled beneath him. He was exposed. "Cover me," she shouted. One of the soldiers hesitated. "It's too hot." She didn't wait for permission. Elena sprinted into the open. Bullets cracked past her ears. Dust exploded at her feet. She slid beside Jenkins and immediately applied a tourniquet above the wound. "Look at me," she ordered. I can't feel my leg." "You're going to be fine. Stay with me." She tightened the tourniquet until the bleeding slowed. Another burst of gunfire struck the pavement inches away. "Smoke," someone yelled. A canister clattered and thick gray smoke billowed across the street. Elena dragged Jenkins through the haze, inch by inch, muscles screaming. 2 soldiers grabbed his vest and pulled him the rest of the way behind cover. She worked quickly, packing the wound, starting an IV. Monitoring his breathing. "Doc," Jenkins whispered, eyes wide with shock. "I've got you," she said firmly. The firefight raged for nearly 15 minutes before the insurgents were neutralized. When the dust settled, 2 soldiers were wounded. None were dead. Captain Rhodes approached her as she finished bandaging the second casualty. "You ran into direct fire," he said. "Yes, sir." "You could have been killed." "Yes, sir." He studied her again, longer this time. "Good work." It wasn't praise, but it wasn't laughter either. The second operation came 3 weeks later. By then, the squad had stopped calling her, just a medic. Now they called her, Doc. Respect came quietly. They were assigned to escort a humanitarian convoy through a contested valley. Intelligence suggested light resistance. Intelligence was wrong. The ambush was brutal. An IED detonated beneath the lead vehicle, flipping it onto its side in a burst of flame and shrapnel. The explosion knocked Elena off her feet. Her ears rang. Smoke filled the air. Screams pierced through the chaos. Man down. Multiple casualties. Elena pushed herself up and ran toward the overturned vehicle. The heat was intense. Flames licked at the metal frame. Inside, 2 soldiers were trapped. Without hesitation, she crawled through the shattered window. "Doc, don't," someone shouted behind her. Inside the vehicle, the world was a furnace. One soldier was unconscious, pinned by debris. The other was conscious but bleeding heavily from his abdomen. "Elena," he gasped. "I'm here." The fire was spreading. She assessed quickly. The pinned soldier first. She wedged her shoulder beneath the metal beam and pushed with everything she had. It shifted just enough. "Help," she yelled. 2 soldiers grabbed the unconscious man and dragged him out. The flames crept closer. Now the second soldier. She applied pressure to the abdominal wound, packing it tightly. "Stay awake," she ordered. "I don't want to die," he whispered. "You're not going to." The vehicle groaned ominously. She hooked her arm around him and pulled. The heat scorched her gloves. Her lungs burned from smoke inhalation. But she didn't stop. They tumbled out seconds before the vehicle exploded. The blast wave knocked her flat on her back. For a moment, everything went black. When her vision cleared, she saw Captain Rhodes crouched over her. "You with me?" She nodded weakly. "You're insane," he muttered, but there was something else in his voice now. Pride. That night, as the squad rested in a secured compound, no one laughed. Jenkins sat beside her, leg bandaged but healing. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "That's my job." "No," he shook his head. "That's more than a job." Elena stared at the dark horizon. She didn't need applause. She needed them alive. The real test came during Operation Iron Dagger. Intelligence warned of heavy insurgent presence inside a factory complex on the outskirts of the city. Multiple buildings, narrow corridors, limited visibility, perfect kill zone. The squad moved in at dawn. Everything was quiet, too quiet. They breached the first building without resistance. The second was empty. The third was a trap. Gunfire erupted from elevated catwalks. Ambush. Chaos exploded. 2 soldiers went down immediately. One shot in the chest. Another hit in the shoulder. Elena dropped beside the chest wound first. Blood soaked through his vest. She cut it open. Entry wound. No exit. His breathing was shallow, bubbling. Tension pneumothorax. She acted instantly, inserting a needle into his chest cavity to relieve the pressure. Air hissed out. His breathing stabilized. "Doc," he rasped. "You're staying with me." Explosions shook the building as grenades detonated nearby. The squad was pinned. Bullets rained from above. "We're surrounded," someone shouted. Elena dragged the wounded soldier behind a steel column. Another scream echoed. She turned. Sergeant Malik lay near the center of the room, unmoving. Open ground between them, heavy fire. For half a second, fear froze her. Then she moved. She sprinted through gunfire again. A bullet tore through her sleeve, grazing her arm. She didn't slow. She reached Malik and rolled him onto his back. No pulse. She began CPR. Gunfire thundered around her. "Doc, we have to move." Someone yelled. Not without him. She continued compressions. 1, 2, 3. Gunshots sparked against metal inches away. 4, 5. "Come on, Sergeant." 6, 7. He coughed violently. A pulse returned. She nearly collapsed in relief. With covering fire from the squad, they managed to extract all wounded soldiers and retreat to a defensive position outside the complex. The firefight lasted another hour before air support forced the insurgents to withdraw. When it was over, the factory lay in ruins. But every member of the squad was alive. Every single one. That night, no one called her, just a medic. They called her something else. Guardian. Elena sat alone outside the temporary barracks, staring at the stars. Her arm was bandaged. Her lungs still burned from smoke and dust. But her squad was alive. Footsteps approached. Captain Rhodes sat beside her. "You know what they're saying about you." She didn't answer. "They're saying you carried them through hell." She shook her head. "They carried each other." He looked at her seriously. "They would have died without you." She stared at her hands. Bloodstains never fully washed out. "I don't want medals," she said quietly. "You won't get laughter anymore either." For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. But war is patient, and it was waiting for something worse. 3 weeks later, they were deployed to a remote mountain outpost. No backup within 20 miles. Limited supplies. Minimal communication. It was supposed to be a routine hold and observe mission. It wasn't. At 0200 hours, mortars began falling from the darkness. The first explosion obliterated the communications tower. The second struck the outer wall. The third landed inside the compound. Screams tore through the night. Elena grabbed her medic kit before she was fully awake. Flames illuminated the mountainside. They were under siege, and this time, there was no evacuation coming. The first mortar strike shattered the night. The second turned darkness into fire. By the third, the mountain outpost was no longer a defensive position, it was a burning cage. Elena Marquez hit the ground as debris rained down around her. The communications tower collapsed in a shower of sparks, severing their last reliable link to command. No comms, someone shouted. Another explosion rocked the eastern wall. Captain Rhodes' voice cut through the chaos. Defensive positions, hold the perimeter. The squad scrambled into formation despite the disorientation. Tracer rounds streaked from the mountainside above. Insurgents had the high ground, and the advantage. Elena ran toward the first scream she heard. Private Lewis lay near the barracks entrance, his leg twisted unnaturally, shrapnel embedded deep in his thigh. Blood pumped rhythmically from the wound. Arterial. She dropped to her knees. Tourniquet, she ordered, already pulling one from her kit. Jenkins, once the first man she dragged through gunfire, was at her side in seconds. He handed it to her without a word. She cinched it tight. Lewis screamed. "Stay with me," she said firmly. "Look at me. You're not going anywhere." Mortars continued to fall. Dirt and smoke filled the air. Another shout echoed from the western wall. "Man down." Elena looked up. There were too many voices. Too many wounded. She couldn't be everywhere, but she would try. She finished stabilizing Lewis, tagging him for priority evacuation, even though she knew evacuation wasn't coming anytime soon. Then she ran again. Near the sandbagged western barricade, Sergeant Malik was dragging Corporal Reeves behind cover. Reeves' chest plate was cracked. Blood seeped beneath it. Elena slid beside them. She cut open the vest. The wound was deep, not immediately fatal, but close. She pressed gauze hard against it. "Malik, hold this pressure," she ordered. Gunfire erupted inches above their heads. "You're bleeding too," Malik growled. "I'm fine." She wasn't. The graze from the factory mission had reopened, soaking her sleeve red. But it didn't matter. What mattered was Reeves' breathing. It was getting weaker. She inserted a chest seal, working by flashlight as explosions flashed across the compound. "Doc," Reeves whispered faintly. "I've got you," she said again. She always said that, and she always meant it. The attack intensified. Insurgents began descending the mountain slope, using the mortars to cover their advance. The squad was outnumbered, low on ammunition, low on medical supplies. Captain Rhodes ducked behind cover near Elena. "They're pushing in," he said. "We won't hold the outer wall much longer." "How many wounded?" "5 confirmed, possibly more," she calculated rapidly. Supplies were dwindling fast. "How long until reinforcements?" He didn't answer. They both knew. Too far. Too late. Another mortar struck the supply shed. The explosion sent a shockwave across the compound. Elena turned just in time to see flames engulf the building. Her backup medical crate, gone. For a split second, something broke inside her. Not fear, fury. They were trapped, surrounded, cut off, and her squad was bleeding. She stood. "What are you doing?" Rhodes demanded. "If they breach the inner gate, we lose everyone," she said. "That's not your fight. It is if they get through." Before he could stop her, she grabbed a fallen rifle. The medic they once laughed at, now standing between the flames and her squad. She took position beside Jenkins. "You know how to use that?" he asked, eyes wide. Yes, she did. Not her primary skill, but she was still a soldier. Insurgents reached the outer wall. Gunfire erupted at close range. Elena fired controlled bursts, covering Malik as he repositioned a wounded man. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't charging. She was calculating. Every movement served one purpose: buy time. Buy seconds. Seconds meant lives. An insurgent managed to breach the gate's side panel. Elena moved. She dropped the rifle and tackled the wounded soldier out of the line of fire just as bullets tore through the sandbags. Pain exploded across her shoulder. A bullet had grazed deeper this time. She bit back a scream. "Doc, you're hit," Jenkins shouted. "I'm fine," she snapped, though blood soaked through her uniform. She crawled toward the gate, pulled a fragmentation grenade from a fallen soldier's vest, and rolled it through the breach. Grenade. The explosion sealed the gap temporarily. Silence followed for 3 precious seconds. 3 seconds was enough. Captain Rhodes rallied the squad. Push them back. The soldiers surged forward with renewed intensity. Because their medic, the one they used to mock, was bleeding beside them and still fighting. They weren't losing her. Not tonight. Hours felt like lifetimes. The mortars eventually stopped. Gunfire became sporadic, then distant, then gone. The mountains fell quiet. Dawn crept over the ridge, illuminating smoke rising from the shattered outpost. Reinforcements finally arrived at 0617 hours. Helicopter blades thundered overhead. Medics rushed in, but for most of the night, there had only been one. Elena collapsed only after the last wounded soldier was loaded onto a stretcher. She had applied 14 tourniquets, inserted 6 chest seals, performed CPR twice, fought at the gate, sealed a breach, and carried 3 grown men across burning ground. When exhaustion finally claimed her, it was silent. She woke in a field hospital 2 days later. Her shoulder was stitched, her arm bandaged, her lungs treated for smoke inhalation. Captain Rhodes stood near the bed. "You scared the hell out of us," he said. She tried to sit up. "How many?" she asked. He understood the question. 0 fatalities. Her eyes closed briefly. "Good. You carried them," he said quietly. "Through the flames. Through all of it." She shook her head slightly. They fought because you kept them alive long enough to." He paused. "You know what they're calling you now." She sighed faintly. "What?" "The flame bearer." She almost laughed. "I'm just a medic." "No," he said firmly. "You're the reason 12 soldiers went home." Weeks later, back at base, a small ceremony was held. No grand speeches, no press, just the squad. Jenkins stepped forward first. "You ran into gunfire for me," he said. Malik spoke next. "You restarted my heart." Reeves, still recovering, managed a weak grin. "You dragged me out of a burning vehicle." One by one, they spoke. Not about medals, not about heroics, about moments, seconds, hands that refused to let go. Captain Rhodes finally stepped forward with a small velvet box. Inside was a commendation medal. Elena stared at it. "I didn't do this for that," she said quietly. "We know," he replied. "That's why you deserve it." She accepted it, not for herself, but for her brother, for the 15-year-old girl who once held a dying hand and felt powerless. She wasn't powerless anymore. Months passed. The squad rotated home. Families reunited. Tears flowed, and in every story told around dinner tables and backyard barbecues, there was one name repeated. Doc. The one they laughed at. The one they doubted. The one who ran into fire instead of away from it. Elena stood alone one evening outside the barracks, the sunset casting gold across the training field. Jenkins joined her. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "Choosing this." She thought about the flames. The screams. The blood on her hands. She thought about the silence after mortars stopped. She thought about 12 soldiers breathing because she refused to quit. "No," she said softly. He nodded. "You know people are going to hear this story." She shrugged. "I hope they don't hear about me." "What then?" "I hope they hear that medics aren't just anything." He smiled. "They will."